All right. Thank you very much. We're delighted to be joined, as promised, by Zoe Brennan, who is the spokesperson for the International Organization for Migration, and our old friend, Zoe's a new friend, but our old friend Jonathan Prentice, who is the head of the UN Network on Migration, and they will speak to you about the launch of the World Migration Report. You may want to raise your chair a little bit.
Yep.
No. Hold on, let me do that for you.
Thank you very much.
It'll look better on television.
Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Father. Please, Zoe, go ahead.
Thank you very much. What's that? Can you hear me? Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, IOM is releasing the World Migration Report 2026, which looks closely at how migration is shaping economies, societies, and communities around the world. The evidence is clear. When migration is well managed, it supports jobs, economic growth, stability, and social cohesion. Migrants contribute as workers, entrepreneurs, and consumers, and through the skills, innovation, and connections they bring across borders. At the same time, it is important to keep migration in perspective. Globally, only a small share of people move across borders. Today, around 3.7% of the world's population are international migrants, a proportion that has remained broadly stable at around 3% over time. Most people do not migrate, and migration remains the exception rather than the norm. The report also highlights that displacement is rising sharply. By the end of 2024, an estimated 83.4 million people were internally displaced within their own countries, the highest number ever recorded, driven by conflict, violence, and disasters. This underscores that most displacement happens within countries rather than across borders. But the report also shows that these gains are at risk. As safe and regular migration pathways narrow, migration does not stop. Instead, it shifts into more irregular and dangerous routes, increasing risks for migrants, raising costs for states, and undermining the broader benefits migration can deliver. The report underscores that migration is not a single global story. Most people never move across borders, and most displacement happens within countries. Patterns vary widely by region, and responses should be tailored to national context, evidence-based and grounded in cooperation. Our message is a practical one, ensuring safe and regular pathways, supporting skills, mobility, and strengthening regional cooperation are not abstract goals. They are concrete steps that respect national borders and priorities and help countries manage migration more effectively while delivering real benefits for economies and people alike. The World Migration Report is IOM's flagship publication and has been produced regularly for over 2 decades. It brings together the latest global data, research, and analysis to help policymakers, practitioners, and the public better understand migration trends and their impacts. At its core, the report reflects IOM's commitment to data and evidence as the foundation for informed, effective, and balanced migration policies. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Prentice?
Thank you very much. I'm actually not here to talk about the World Migration Report, but it is a wonderful coincidence. I suspect it may not be a coincidence that it is coming out on this first day of the second International Migration Review Forum. This is the quadrennial meeting by which member states of the General Assembly come together to review many of the progresses and challenges that Zoe just alluded to within the framework of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. That meeting kicked off yesterday with over 400 stakeholders coming together here at United Nations headquarters, and has begun at the intergovernmental level today with discussions taking place on such issues as drivers and pathways, and more recently, saving lives, border management, how to combat trafficking and smuggling, and it will conclude on Friday in the General Assembly. Thank you.
Thanks. I believe we also have two people online, Pablo Rojas Coppari and Stuart Russell Campo from IOM's research team, who are here to address any technical questions. At this stage, I will turn the floor over for questions. Please identify to whom, either the people here in this podium or online, you want to address your question to. Yes, Evelyn? Yeah.
Greetings, Evelyn Leopold, Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists. Can you focus on the United States since we're here and we see these warehouses and what some of us would call first-class cruelty? Have you spoken to them? Have you given them proper reports that maybe they would read? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So today we're here to talk primarily about the World Migration Report. So I probably would hand over to my colleague Stuart just to talk a little bit more about the kind of top line trends that we're seeing across that. Stuart, are you able to elaborate on that?
Thank you, Zoe. Sure, and thank you for the question. Just to reiterate that the World Migration Report is, by its definition and as the name suggests, a global report. We do not go into country-specific data and analysis in the report. Of course, as an organization, IOM does support our member states in generating data and analysis about key trends and dynamics related to human mobility in its full spectrum. And so there are available resources and research to be drawn on, but that's not the focus of the World Migration Report, which is looking at the global broad picture here today. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Noreen?
Thank you very much. My name is Noreen Hossein with IPS News. I just want to ask about whether the report touches on the climate change and migration nexus, and what are perhaps some key takeaways from how climate change or climate may impact migration trends. Thank you.
So again, I'll hand over to Stuart.
Thanks, Zoe, and I'll invite my colleague Pablo to speak to that as he's closer to that part of the report.
Thank you, Stuart. Absolutely. I'll invite you to take a closer look at chapter 6 of the World Migration Report 2026 that looks specifically at the impact of climate change and mobility. Some of the key findings of that report particularly looks at how migration and mobility is used as a form of adaptation by communities to address the impact of climate change, and also the importance of investing in local community and local actors as well as diaspora actors to mitigate some of the effects of climate change, and also to leverage some of the contributions that these communities make in the whole mobility spectrum.
Namo?
I have three questions. One for Ms. Brennan. So you said that as legal pathways narrow, people are pushed onto more dangerous and irregular routes to migrate. Can you refer to some of those legal pathways that have narrowed? And how strong is this correlation that people take, let's say, those small boats and they die in the seas as a result of that policy in Europe, for example, that policy in the United States? I'd be grateful if you can elaborate more on that. And another question for Jonathan. How do you see the expansion of third country deportation agreements under the Trump administration, if you can talk about that? And maybe one data-related question for your colleagues online. Setting politics aside and only focusing on the evidence, what does the data consistently show about the net economic impact of migration? Is migration a driver of economic growth or inhibitor of growth? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So I think the whole point about the World Migration Report is that we want to focus on the evidence and get very granular on the evidence. So again, I'd hand over to Stuart on the pathways to just talk about the trends that we're seeing. But Stuart, I also wanted you to point out when the data has been collected, bearing in mind that it's you can explain how it's not the most absolute up-to-the-minute data, but is instead a compendium.
Certainly. Thank you, Zoe. And thank you for that question. So just maybe to start with the point that Zoe made last, given the nature of the report and also the rigorous peer review through which it's produced, we work with the latest global reference figures. So for example, the migrant stock data is released by UNDESA on a periodic every 4-year basis. And so the latest figures are what was released in January of last year, 2025, and the reference point is mid-2024. That's why you see us referring to as of mid-2024, the latest stock is this. So depending on the phenomenon being examined or the focus thematically of the different chapters, you'll see different global stock reference data. In terms of those specific pathways, of course, the different types that Zoe mentioned are all in focus, and depending on the different thematic chapters, you'll learn more about which pathways are sort of being examined from a regular pathways perspective in terms of student visa opportunities, labor mobility, different forms of regular migration, as it were. And as Zoe mentioned, because it's not up to the last minute data, we're not looking necessarily at the recent shifts in migration policy, but we do see the trends reflected and analyzed in detail in terms of a hardening of migration governance and different factors that are shifting how people decide to move. And just to address that other part of the first question, what we find, you'll see references in the report to the Missing Migrants Project, which is a key component of IOM's global data work. While we saw in the last year a reduction in attempted crossings on the Central Mediterranean route, which is one of the major routes, we saw a doubling in the number of migrants who went missing or were found dead. So this shows that these routes are becoming more dangerous and treacherous. The data in the World Migration Report and the contributing sources of data and analysis provide a much richer picture of this, and we welcome you to dive in.
Stefano.
Thank you, Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York, Ital Press. I'm sorry, I have several questions. I will try just to pick 3. But first one, for one understand the report show clearly that the percentage of migrants is not extraordinary compared to the entire population. So how would you, what would be your message, not to government, but to public opinions, especially in Western Europe and let's say North America, that they are terrorized by governments or political candidates that say that, you know, there is a wave coming, and their reasoning is also this, is if we don't stop them, even if like your percentage is minimum, well, the only reason they are not this huge wave is because we trying, you know, we stop them. So what would be your, and then I have other questions. Another one, for example, is this. Your leadership, Amy Pope, came when there was President Biden, and so there was a lot of hope, at least for the people that care about your work, that with the backup of United States, your agency finally had, you know, the tools and the power to really act. Then President Trump came, and so my question is, I don't know if you can answer, maybe Amy Pope can answer, but what has been the relationship between the United States government and the leadership of your agency since the coming of a new administration? And last, well, let's have these two, and I'm taking too much time.
Thank you very much. So the aim of this report is to put migration into perspective. And you're absolutely right to point out that very often there is a gap between reality and perception around the figures. So that's why we want to publish these very clear figures. And I think the central point there is also that when people come into communities, those communities have to be prepared to support people so that migration is well managed and people feel that there is a sense of control, because everybody benefits when migration works well. To your second point, I really can only speak from the context of the World Migration Report, but one of the elements that we feel very strongly about is that we have to be able to speak from a data standpoint. So we are putting a lot of resource into the World Migration Report so that we can form policy from a factual basis.
Then, sorry, very quick, it will be like a follow-up. This report, did you write it for the members of United Nations, means for the governments, or did you write it for the public, world public opinion? In that case, if it's the second option, what are you doing a part of this press conference? I hope help. But what is going to be your strategy to make the most possible people come into your website to read this report?
One Stuart will want to talk to in terms of the audience. Handing over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Zoe, and thanks for the question. So your question implies that you've understood we're looking at a broad audience here. It's not just for the member states of the United Nations or IOM's member states specifically, but really looking at providing an evidence base for a balanced discussion and for more evidence-based migration narratives. So you are all here for the first of what will be a series of launching events and media-facing engagements around different capitals in the world, and really building on the momentum of the IMRF this week to get the report out there and make sure that people are also aware of the resources that we've developed to accompany it. One piece that may also be of interest to those of you in the room is that we are working on an update to the World Migration Report Fact Checkers Toolkit. We know that empowering media with access to data and evidence is essential to contributing to more balanced narratives. And so that's something that we're investing in now and hope to release by the end of the summer or in the fall. So watch for that as a complementary resource to the report that you now have in your hands today. And please do help us spread the word about the availability of this data and evidence.
Arul Lewis from Indo-Asian News Service. India recently signed a series of agreements covering labor movement with the EU, UK, Germany, and New Zealand, among others. What is your observation on that? And the second point is, do you think that such agreements could be a model for other countries to follow also? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Jonathan on this one to talk about that from an IMRF perspective. We're not able to go into the detail of that specifically, but I know that you will want to say something about how we are bringing the member states together this week and what that means.
Yeah, in fact, there's been a number of questions on various aspects of the migration agenda. As I said in my very brief opening comments, this week sees something really quite remarkable taking place in the General Assembly. In 2018, the member states came together and agreed on the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. The clue is in the title. It is trying to manage this remarkable phenomenon of human movement that brings with it huge potential and benefits, but when it's not governed well, can lead to really desperate challenges of the like that we see too often in the media. And what we have this week is over 130 member states coming together to discuss various ways of having, of moving that agenda forward in a cooperative environment. So, sir, your Minister for External Affairs was one of the principal speakers this morning discussing one of the key issues in the Global Compact on how you strengthen and improve the quality of labour pathways. But that's simply one aspect of the dimension, the range of dimensions of the migration agenda. Earlier, I wasn't able to be there. There was a discussion on saving lives, an issue that all too tragically we see about and you report about in the media, and how we can do better to ensure that those people who feel, for whatever reason, compelled to move, do not lose their lives through that act. So I would urge you to situate the World Migration Report as a contribution to improving our understanding of the nature of migration in all of its dimensions, so that member states and other parties can figure out how best to manage it in a way that works for them and in a way that works for migrants. Thank you.
Sinan?
Thank you very much. My name is Sinan Tunçdemir from the Amargi. How is the rise of right-wing political parties in the West linked to the closing of borders and pushback policies? In your opinion, or any of your opinion, how does this trend hurt international refugee laws and basic human rights? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. So every country has the right to shape its own migration policies. What we know from the evidence is that when states cooperate at regional and global level, there are better outcomes. Stuart, do you want to speak on a more granular level to the question?
I think you've covered it well, Zoe. What we're looking at in the WMR and in similar analyses that feed into this global report is the relationship between these policy decisions, the options that are available to migrants, and their experience in countries of origin, transit, and destination. So this is a complex phenomenon, but we're looking at both the structural elements that the question alluded to, like policy decisions or different political developments, as well as the sort of aspirations and capabilities of migrants themselves. So you have to look at this holistically. That's what we try to do in the report. And of course, as Zoe alluded to, it's a really complex phenomenon across national contexts that we try to give you some sort of macro analysis of in this report to then spur farther discussion and debate by member states.
Taushu? Sorry, Minlu? Yeah, yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the briefing. I have two questions. First one is, the report shows that restricting pathways does not stop migration and may push people into more irregular and dangerous routes. So at a time when we see many governments, many countries are tightening border and asylum policies, what is IOM's message to governments? Second question is, so we see the current US-Iran tensions and the maritime insecurity around the Strait of Hormuz. I'm wondering if the IOM began any assessment of the potential migration impact if the Strait of Hormuz crisis continues or escalates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the first question, do you want to speak to that, Jonathan, in terms of member states?
Sorry, I got distracted there. I really do apologize. My son has just finished his exams and was sending me a text message. So if you could repeat the first question, I'd be eternally grateful, with apologies.
No worries. Sure. So the first question is about the report. So we see that the report shows that restricting pathways does not stop migration and may push people into more irregular and dangerous routes. But at a time when we see many countries are tightening border and asylum policies, what is the IOM's message to governments?
Thank you. And again, apologies for missing that. I'm going to come back to the other document that I keep talking about, which is the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. And it is a document that I really would, for those who are interested in migration and in covering migration in the media, it is a document that I would commend to you. It is a voluntary framework supported by the overwhelming majority of member states. And in that, the essential thesis of this cooperative framework is that we need to work together, whether that is governments or within governments or bringing whole of society with them, in order to find ways that can address the migration phenomenon. It is not always, in fact, it is rarely a crisis. The overwhelming majority of migration proceeds through pathways that are entirely legitimate and entirely safe. But in those situations where people feel compelled to move or they find themselves in an irregular situation, that's where difficulties can emerge. Those difficulties can emerge both for the migrants themselves in terms of their increasingly precarious situation, as you yourself raised, and it can also raise concerns in terms of people's belief in the integrity of their migration procedures. And I think there were other comments from the press corps regarding trust and emerging different anti-migration sentiments. All of these things feed in to each other. And the purpose of the Global Compact is to figure out how to manage it in a way that works as best as possible. One aspect is expanding or enhancing or strengthening the qualities of pathways to address the point you raised. Another way is to ensure that the decision to move in the first place is truly voluntary, so that people can also have the capacity to stay in their countries of origin if that's what they choose, but are not compelled to leave. Other aspects are to say that if you are moving in a situation of duress, that we do better as governments to ensure stronger cooperation to combat trafficking networks and smuggling networks that can expose these individuals to further risk of harm or worse. So I think the answer to your question is not necessarily a binary one of pathways or danger, but you have to view this compact in a holistic sense to understand the entire nature of the migratory dynamics. So, thank you.
Okay, last question, Stefano? Oh, wait, you had one more? You had a follow-up?
I raised two questions, so only the first question answered.
Yes, I can answer your second question regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Thank you. That is off the topic of the World Migration Report, but I can say that we, like our sister agencies, we have some supply chain issues. And in terms of migration, we're not seeing huge movements of people, but we are monitoring closely. Thank you.
The report is available. I believe it's available online as well, right?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So you can find it on the IOM website. Stefano, last question.
Yes, I said I had a lot of questions, but one is actually a follow-up on the Global Compact. If I heard well, you said that there were 130 countries represented at the General Assembly at the moment discussing. Is it correct? But in 2018, I think where the votes in favor were 152. Four? Oh, even more. So did you, I mean, what happened to these 24 countries that in 2018 they came? And then another question is, this Global Compact, okay, was approved, the majority of countries, the members. But what technically happened when the Global Compact decides something that all the countries that sign it should respect, and one of the and then there is a situation where some of the countries, some big countries, they didn't sign. How this relates? And then I have a question that I do ask this question usually to the leader of UNHCR, but this time I want to do with your agency. Do you know the percentage of people that you take care in, for you are migrants, but in reality, maybe they start as migrants, but they became refugees? And I give you an example. Somebody that live an African country that there is no war, okay, and arrives to Libya, trying to get to Europe. Well, he's captured by trafficker. Then he's put in this lager. Then he's tortured. They ask for money to the family, whatever. And then he's all of a sudden, he's somehow, some way, he's released and he's found on a boat, or he gets to you. Do you consider this person still a migrant or a refugee?
Intervene, if I may, on your first question. And because we're focusing on the World Migration Report, I'm going to ask you, I can feel that Jonathan is itching to answer your questions, but I'm going to ask him to take that off with you bilaterally, please. And on the second question, that's obviously a question of definitions. I would hand back to Stuart to just talk a little bit about the difference between a refugee and a migrant under international law and how we categorize that within the World Migration Report. Back to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Zoe. It's perhaps an exciting point to make and end on, but I would just welcome you to refer to the glossary in the report, which shares all of the global definitions, including in relation to international migration law and how these different categories in which people may indeed find themselves across their migration journey are defined and handled both in terms of member state management of upholding their obligations under IML, and how we imagine and define our service offering to support people on the move throughout their journeys.
And with that, I'd like to thank once more our guests, Zoe Brennan, the spokesperson for the International Organization for Migration, Jonathan Prentice, head of the UN Network on Migration, and Pablo Rojas Coppari and Stuart Russell Campo online from IOM's research team. Thank you all for this great briefing. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much.